Today on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories, I'm joined by Brendan McGurgan. Brendan has spent more than 25 years helping businesses grow from small operations into global success stories. As former group managing director of CDE Global, he helped scale the company from just 15 employees to almost 700 people operating in 6 different continents. He is the co-founder of Simple Scaling, creator of the ScaleX Framework, best-selling author, podcast host, and one of the UK's leading voices on scaling businesses with purpose. And Brendan, also, I have to say, having met him, spent time with him, and been on his podcast, is one super guy. Brendan, welcome to the show.
Doug, can I take you with me on my travels to help me with those introductions? Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. Lovely to be here.
Not at all. Well, I had the honor of being on your podcast, and obviously we met through a mutual friend, which is Jack Daly, who's also been on the show, and Daniel Priestley now as well, who's also been at your summit as well. So you've had some amazing people on your at your ScaleX summit, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs actually have been through your ScaleX or Simple Scaling courses for entrepreneurs and leaders as well. So very well known in the UK marketplace. So I've got loads of questions, and half of them are just to give the audience a really good insight of who you are and what you do, and half of them are selfishly because I know you're a bit of a guru, so I'm going to try and grill you and try and learn from you as well at the same time. So obviously you're at CDE, and you, as I said, you built that from 15 people to 700. Tell us a little bit about that and how you did that as well.
So, yeah, look, this sets the context for how Simple Scaling evolved. To go back a little bit, I qualified as a chartered accountant. My friends would tell me I'm all better now. That as soon as I qualified, 2.5 decades ago, it was a passport into business. So I think within months of qualifying, I went straight into business. It was a technology business back in the early 2000s during the wonderful dot-com boom. And what we did with that business then was scaling, albeit scaling wasn't a thing back then. It just came into the business lexicon. I suppose in the last 15 years, the last 5 years, it's become very sexy for people to talk about scaling, but it wasn't a thing back then. But what we did was scale that technology business. But with every good boom comes a bust. And I had a knock on the door from a recruiter inviting me to go and have a conversation with this guy who was leading a small engineering firm in Cookstown. I had a conversation, and that led me to join the business, and shortly thereafter become the managing director and a shareholder of the business. At that stage, we were doing about £3-4 million in revenue, and as you say, a small team of 15 people in a small business park in Northern Ireland. And I had the wonderful privilege, and I didn't do this, I did it together with an incredible group of people. We led that business to become number one in its category across the globe. And as you mentioned at the outset, we expanded across 6 continents, exported to more than 100 countries. And in the end, our team was kicking the backside off almost 700 people. So an incredible journey in terms of the how we did it. We'll get into that in the context of actually our ScaleX framework, or what we call as ScaleX OS. It's a principle-led operating system for scaling. So we can take that anywhere you wish, because it can be a very long story or a very short story, depending on what way you want to go, Doug.
Yeah, well, look, and obviously you did incredibly well. And then what made you pivot then across from being the managing director of a global company to then setting up a performance consultancy business and training business?
Yeah, great question. So I was in the business for almost 17 years. We went through a number of strategic iterations. Let's say whenever I became managing director in 2007, I had this wonderful, exciting, ambitious vision to bring the company to £100 million in revenue. At that stage, we were doing just over 10 million. And within months of launching that vision, or Vision 2010 at that stage, the world collapsed. You'll recall the collapse of Lehman Brothers, other banking institutions, professional people for the first time in our lifetimes. People in accountancy, in law, in banking were losing their jobs. So a very, very challenging time. We navigated through that, came out of that very successfully. Really managed to get the business into great shape and went through a number of different strategic cycles. The next one was our Ready for Rio, leveraging on the excitement of the London Olympics back in 2012. We were going to set up in South America by 2016, and so we actually used the strap line of Ready for Rio as that strategic cycle. Then the next one was our 2020 vision, and by the time it was nearing completion of the 2020 vision, I had been in the company, as I mentioned, for almost 17 years, 12 years more than 12 years as managing director at that point. And I started to reflect on what I wanted for the next chapter of my life. I had an opportunity at that stage to sell my shares back in the back end of 2019, 2020, and I took that opportunity. Still, I'm involved in a part of the business to this day, which I co-own along with one of the other co-founders of the original business and one of our Indian promoters. It's a business based out of India called Seaflow. So I'm still a non-exec director and shareholder of that business and reasonably actively involved. So where did that take us? In 2019, 2020, when I left the business, I began to receive these kind invitations to go for coffee. And it was typically from a founder, CEO of a small and medium-sized enterprise who had witnessed the growth, the scaling of CDE, and the theme of the conversation, the request was typically some flavor of, can you tell me what you guys did in there because we'd like to do the same? How did you do it? And I found myself saying lots of the same things, but began to get really curious as to why are people asking me this question over and over again? Surely all businesses do this. And that sounds like a naive thing to say, but Doug, you've been caught in the bubble of a business. And whenever I was in the bubble of CDE, it was my entire life. I ate, slept, breathed CDE. I did not look outside of it other than the benchmark at the time to kind of role model our business on other businesses. Otherwise, I was caught up in the bubble of this business. But as it turns out, as I began to do a little bit of research, less than 1% of small to medium-sized enterprises ever achieve scale. Where do those figures come from? So there's an institute set up in the UK called the ScaleUp Institute by a lady called Sherry Coutu, who I actually had on the podcast. She founded a company called Interactive Investor. She scaled that, sold it for billions, and decided to set up an institute devoted to SME scale-ups because there was great focus on startups. And then you've got the Magnificent Seven who command too much of the airwaves, but you've got this invisible band in the middle, the SMEs, who actually are the fabric of our societies. And I discovered that there are 5.7 million SMEs in the UK. They contribute 2.3 trillion pounds worth of revenue to the UK economy. But 1.3 trillion of that, just less than 60% of that, is coming from 34,000 SMEs, and those are the scale-ups, 0.6%. I thought, wow, how is this the case? You know, and I had the privilege of having this front row seat of driving and leading and building a scale-up. And that was the point in which the penny dropped, and I said, let's codify what it is to scale a business, taking our own experience and actually speak to others who have successfully scaled businesses, leaders in Gymshark, for example, who your listeners would be familiar with, leaders in Skyscanner, leaders more locally in the tech company called Kainos, which was a small spin out of Queen's University, and that became a multi-billion-dollar market cap company, now listed on AIM. And so spent 2 years along with my co-founder and co-author Claire, researching others who had scaled, and was their experience similar to ours in the context of what it was to, what we believe to codify, to scale a business. And we codified that in our ScaleX framework, what we call ScaleX OS, a principle-led operating system for scaling a business. And that was the birth birth of simple scaling. So our vision now is to inspire, connect, and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose.
I love it. And I've read your book, and I've also seen a bit of your background in terms of what you do and all that kind of stuff. And the ScaleX model is based around, if I'm correct, 10 Ps.
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's plan, people, process, performance, proposition, purpose, positive growth. These are not in the right order. Practice, psyche, and partnerships. Is that right?
Almost. So
Almost.
we kick off with principle one. I'll take you for a whiz around, and then we can dive into any of these or all of these. So we start off with psyche, then we move to purpose and vision, people, planning, process, performance, proposition, place, partnership, and the keystone principle is positive growth culture. And what we found is that these principles are fundamental truths that are existent in every successful scaling business.
Yeah, 100%. And talking of which, let's just dive into a couple of those. So some of them are obvious and some of them not so obvious. In terms of psychology, I think two of them that link in quite into those, well, three of them, I probably, or maybe even more, but definitely psyche and purpose and positive growth and people, I suppose, as well. How important do you think is the psychology of a person, the psyche of a person in terms of successful business?
It is everything. So people put stats on this. I don't know where they get their stats from, but that 80% of scaling success is attributed to the mindset, the psyche of the leader. So what we will say is that the business will never scale beyond the psyche or the mindset of the leader. What is the mindset? It's essentially the leader's identity, which is the summation of the leader's belief system. So we can have one leader who believes that they can scale the business to become an international success, that they can take this business from 5 million to 50 million, from 50 million to 500 million. We will have another leader who's operating at 5 million and they don't believe that they can actually take this business to 6 million or 7 million or 8 million. They feel that they believe that there are so many challenges that they're holding on to that is ultimately going to stunt the growth of this business. So the business can never grow beyond the psyche of the leader, the belief system, the summation of the belief systems of that leader. And ultimately, the team underneath that leader can never move beyond the belief system of the leader. So whatever that psyche is of the leader will either empower the scaling trajectory or actually disempower. It will act as a multiplier for all of the other 9 principles of scaling, or it will actually impede the impact, the efficacy of the other 9 principles. So if you take this psyche, let's say I believe this business can be number one in its category. I believe this business can be truly international. And we assert that if you've got a wonderful product or service, then you've an obligation to bring it to the world. So let's say I'm a leader of a business like we were in CDE, and we believe that we could be best in the world. That set the ceiling, which was pretty much unlimited, to what our purpose and vision then became. So our vision then was a global vision to become the number one wet processing equipment solutions provider in every country in the world. That vision followed our own leadership psyche. Now, if I similarly, on the reverse of that, I'm a leader who does not believe that they can be number one in their category, who does not believe that their product or service can be brought to an international market, who does not believe that the talent is available to them, who does not believe that they have the cash resources to scale. Well, ultimately, that's going to cascade down into my team. And I'm not going to I'm not going to hold and communicate a vision that says we can be number one, we can grow this team, we can export to all of these countries. And it's back to that simple but profound statement from Henry Ford, or certainly attributed to Henry Ford: whether you believe you can or you can't, either way you'll prove yourself right. So the leader's psyche is everything. It's the ceiling. It sets the ceiling on the other principles. Everything else flows from that leadership psyche. So how you think, what you say, how you behave will ultimately have an impact on all of the other principles.
I totally agree. I mean, mindset is so important. But how do you take a guy or a girl who has a certain psyche that you know they can expand the business much more? How do you change their psyche? How do you change their mindset?
Well, it's how you change anything. The first is awareness. So it's being aware that actually you're having these disempowering thoughts, and we all have disempowering thoughts. But I interviewed a wonderful guy called Rhett Power who wrote a book called Head of Mentals, and he talks about the two competing voices in our minds. One is the monster, and the other is the maverick. The monster wants to critique all of the time, not in a way that's been in some way out to get you. They're simply trying, the monster's trying to keep you safe, always flagging what can go wrong. And for many people, that monster is very loud and actually overpowers the maverick, the empowering voice, the voice that says, we can do this. Why can't we do this? You know, I often pose the question to people in workshops: why should you scale? And what often comes back from those who have an empowering mindset, they'll shout up and go, you know, why can't we scale? And go, yes, exactly. You know, why not scale? So ultimately, you've got to determine, you've got to become aware: who's speaking? Is it my monster that's very loud and very critical, that's telling me that now is not the right time? You've maybe a previously failed business, you can't do this again, you're a failed entrepreneur, you weren't successful getting into that one market you tried to get into. Why do you think you'll be successful in getting into this other market? That you can't get the talent. That's a limiting belief that comes up time and time again. I cannot get the talent. Oh, I would scale if I could only get the talent. My retort is always, there are 8 billion people on the planet. There's never been as many. Those in the workforce, 80% of them are actively disengaged. There's never been a better time to engage with great talent who want to join companies with an exciting, expansive vision communicated by a leader that's seeking to challenge themselves, such that they want to challenge their team positively, ultimately expand the organization and create a wider impact and deepen their purpose. So it begins with that awareness. What am I saying to myself, both in terms of my thoughts and actually my words? Am I actually articulating what the monster's saying here in terms of this limiting belief system? And it's catching yourself. You know, it's spotting it, it's stopping it, and it's swapping it. And you can only swap it if you've got a vision in the first place. If you don't have a vision for the future, you get snagged in the memories of the past. I know we both like the work of Joe Dispenza, and that's a line that he always says. So first of all, if you set your limitations aside, there's a question I ask: what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
Yeah.
So begin from that place. Go, oh, well, okay, well, in that case, well, we have got a wonderful product. I would absolutely seek to 10x our customer base, widen our reach, bring it to new markets. I would love a bigger team. I'd love to develop a senior management team. I've got these wonderful product ideas to expand and augment our existing product set. And go, okay, well, let's start from there. That's your real vision. What's getting in the way are the limitations that you're putting on yourself. So awareness, then we examine the belief system. And it's a process. This is a journey, not of days or weeks or months. This is a journey of years, because every level has a new devil. You think when I will have cracked it. I thought I would have cracked it whenever we moved from 5 million to 10 million. And then that brought on a whole raft of new issues. When we moved from 10 million to 25 million, another raft of new issues. And each time we reached a new level, that level commanded me to be someone different. It commanded me to up my game, to drop some of the old limiting beliefs and actually take on new beliefs. So it's you recognizing that these limiting beliefs are actually there, that you start to control your thoughts in a way where you're spotting them, you're stopping them, you're swapping them. You're measuring responses instead of reacting to every situation that's out there. You put disciplines in place that actually undergird an empowering psyche. And you surround yourself in an environment that's conducive to scaling. So if you think less than 1% of SMEs are actually achieving scale, if we walk into a room now, randomly selected 100 SME leaders, there's one of those leaders who's actually scaling. The other 99 are suggesting to them that they're mad. So you've got to get into a room with others who are like-minded, who are going to champion, cheerlead, support you, who have been on the journey, who have overcome some of the challenges that you're going to encounter and can support you in getting there. And that's why we established our ScaleX Accelerator program, our 12-month program. And then for the graduates of the program, we've created our ScaleX Club. What I always say to people, if you want to ride a bike really well, go and join a cycling club. If you want to swim really well, join a swim club, get a coach. If you want to learn how to run, join a running club. If you want to learn how to scale, get yourself into a scaling club. So environment is absolutely critical in the context of actually surrounding yourself with people who are going to support you in creating the mindset that's conducive to actually scaling success.
Yeah, and you've got some great people around you as well, I've met. So that obviously massively helps. And obviously you've got the backdrop of your own psyche, your own energy, and your own positivity that is obviously driving the business. But I know there's a lot of people out there, and let's use the ScaleX business as an example. There's a lot of people out there that either are coaches like myself, or have training businesses, or even just normal businesses. But using the model of what you're doing now, what do you think has been the most successful driver of scaling your business? In terms of, I know you do a lot of, I can see you do the Instagram ads. I know you're a great presenter yourself. I know you're doing the podcast, which helps in terms of lead generation. What do you think that's uniquely helped you grow more successfully than a lot of other coaching and training companies?
It's a great question. And in the early stages, I had nothing. I left the business and I had decided that I wanted to support others, but I didn't want to do it on a one-to-one basis. I didn't think that was the best use of my time. I started off with a number of individual clients, people who from those coffee sessions said, could you help me? And to this day, I still have coaching relationships with them. They won't let me go, or maybe it's the other way around. I won't let them go. So I decided that one-to-one was not the greatest leverage of my time, and I wanted to create something that was one-to-many. So in the early stages, when we launched the program for the first time, we didn't have a book, we didn't have a podcast. We had, at that stage, defined and codified what it was to scale. And I leveraged my network, those people who were approaching me for the coffees and the how-to guide, and brought those together, initially 12 in our very first cohort. And from the success of that, we went on then to actually, we've coached now more than 100 leaders through the ScaleX Accelerator program. But initially it was leveraging the network and the credibility of having been there and done it. People wanted to speak with someone who had ran the path, who had been on the journey. It's a little bit like engaging someone to support you with a triathlon. You're
Yeah.
not going to engage someone who has never completed a triathlon. You're
Yeah.
going to engage someone who's been there and maybe done it several times, and maybe written a book about it. Now, the book came later. So initially, to answer your question directly, the success came from leveraging our own network, both Claire and I. We created a successful cohort. They navigated through the 12-month accelerator program, which we had orchestrated and built out at that point in time. And I never expected the success that we witnessed from those who graduated from the program. And I say this with humility because I've never experienced our program. We wrote the program that I would love to experience whenever we were scaling CDE. At that stage, there wasn't a book, there wasn't a program, there was no scaling school you could go to. But what people were saying to us at the other end of the program when they graduated was the program was transformational, the program was life changing, the program has freed them from their business, has allowed them to work on the business, not in the business. So at the end of the program each year, we still do it. We ask people for one word to sum up their year. And we capture this in a flip chart. And these are the words that were coming back to us. So at the end of the first year, we were uncertain, other than capturing the energy level of people who were going through the workshops. And we would certainly capture feedback at the end of each workshop. But we weren't certain that we had something significantly successful until we were starting to see the changes. And since that, the Scale Up Institute have come in. They have independently assessed the efficacy of the program. I'm delighted to say that on average, companies who participate and graduate from the program go on to achieve, on average, revenue growth of 29% year on year, employment growth of 26%. 100% of them cite an increase in their confidence level towards scaling. So back to the mindset piece, which, confidence is a huge part of that. So that initial network piece, now it's more, I'd say, more sophisticated or a little more sophisticated. I speak on stages. We published our book back in 2022. That has attracted quite a lot of interest in our program from those who have read it. I've gone on to host the podcast. We're now into our 20th season, almost 200 guests, of which you were one, Doug. I've had the privilege of hosting some incredible people, the likes of Stephen Bartlett, high profile, people will know. Pat Lencioni is coming on for the 200th episode. So some incredible guests across the 200 episodes. That also attracts in an interest in the program. It's a lead generating channel. There are dedicated campaigns whenever we're actually launching a program. We leverage LinkedIn, for example, and other channels like Instagram. So it's a mix now of lead generating channels, I would say, Doug, but very different from. When I say very different, it is different from that very first cohort. Now we've got referrals. So many who come into the program have actually been referred by others who have completed the program, which is, I would say, the most powerful means of actually generating leads at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. When I came on your show as well, I managed to get somebody who listened to our show. Actually, he was in school with you, I think.
Oh, wow.
And then he had a business
Brilliant.
which he brought me in, which was great. So no, the podcast is fantastic. And I think you're right. Speaking on stage is a great way of doing that. And obviously, you set up the ScaleX Summit, and you had some fantastic speakers, including Jack Daly, which we talked about, Daniel Priestley, which we were talking about earlier on, and obviously Stephen Bartlett. That's another thing we mentioned beforehand, because I had my own leadership and life mastery summit, that it's a lot of work having to build not just a business, what you're doing in terms of training and coaching, but then to actually organize a global event like you did, and I think you had about 500 people there or something
Yeah,
like that. Yeah, which was phenomenal as well, and bringing in some amazing
thank you.
speakers, which is great. Now, one of the things that I love about you as well is that you have your business side, but you also, like me, you have what I would describe almost like a Buddha side as well. in terms of your Wim Hof breathing techniques, and you're a Wim Hof facilitator, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so I became a Wim Hof instructor back in 2021, and I don't see that as being separate from what I do in business. In fact, I integrate them both.
Yeah.
So this all came about as a result of scaling the business, but at the same time, being a father of three kids. One of those kids has high functioning autism. She's doing incredibly now. She's actually due to graduate from psychology this year, but at one stage,
Oh,
we didn't even think she would make it through school. It was incredibly challenging trying to balance both at the time. I was traveling a lot. Colleen actually stepped back from her job to support what was happening at home. But every time I was coming back from another trip, I was stepping back into a crisis, typically. And I found that incredibly challenging, which is why I love my sport. I have competed in martial arts for years and then got into triathlon. And these were all in a way to manage the stress of both leading a scaling business and coming back and trying to manage the family challenge. And I'll never forget one day sharing this with a great friend, another incredible guy who I've had the privilege to come to know, who scaled a very successful business. And as part of our own networking, we would meet once every 6 weeks. We would run for an hour and then we'd go for breakfast. And I would sharing with him some of the challenges of home. And he said, you should listen to this guy, Wim Hof. He's been interviewed by a guy called Russell Brand on a podcast. And he sent me a link to the podcast. I listened to it. I thought, well, first of all, the guy sounded crazy, but actually I was really curious to understand and experience these breathing techniques that the guy Wim Hof was sharing, to say that this can mitigate your stress levels. You can influence your autonomic nervous system. You can increase your resilience levels. All of these things. I was going, yes, I want all of those, please. So I came home. I Googled him, found some YouTube clips of him guiding some breath work. I found that there was something in this, and I shared it with my wife, and within 6 months we were at a Wim Hof retreat in the west coast of Ireland. I met an incredible guy, Neil O'Murrough, who's gone on to found his own breathwork academy, the Blissful Breath Academy. He's the performance coach to the Red Bull team, the big wave riders, the cliff jumpers, all of those guys who are competing at the very highest level and need to calm their minds, control their nervous system before they compete. And I just found that 2 days in County Clare absolutely profound. For the first time in a long time, I had this sense of peace and calm that until you experience the breath work and the cold exposure, it just took me away for a little moment from all of the challenges and pressures that I was feeling parenting and scaling a business. And I felt at the end of those 2 days that this tool, which is free, it's just breath work, should be known by every business leader out there, because every business leader is encountering challenges which impact their nervous system. It's an employee who has just come in, who you rate very highly, who's handed in their notice, maybe going to a competitor. It's a lost tender. It's an issue on the factory floor. It's a myriad of issues that we're dealing with as business leaders every day. And from an evolutionary perspective, we haven't learned to deal with these in a sophisticated way other than through our breath. And it's so powerful. So I went on this journey. I went across, met Wim, spent time at his academy in Stru, qualified as an instructor. Long story short, I now integrate the Wim Hof method into our 12-month program to support leaders in giving them accessible tools to support them with managing the pressures of scaling a business, and to support them in coaching their teams with actually managing the pressures of scaling a business. And that it takes the form of breath work and also the cold exposure. And the cold exposure is, yeah, it's very popular now. It's been socialized by the likes of Joe Rogan and people on there doing 20-minute ice baths, which I never recommend anyone to do. Um, but the purpose of the cold exposure, it is a myriad of health benefits, but actually it's a wonderful metaphor for scaling itself. Because you have to visualize what it is you're going to do, visualize and do a pre-mortem on the how cold the ice is going to be when you hit the ice, what you're going to do. You practice and simulate the breath work that you're going to enact whenever you actually hit the ice, and and it is about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that's such a wonderful metaphor for scaling a business. The more we can access tools and practices that help us get comfortable with being uncomfortable, then actually the greater our capacity to take on the stress and challenges of scaling a business.
Oh, 100%. And those that are listening, just to support what you said there, I always say that money's in exchange for energy, time, knowledge, and experience. And time, knowledge, and experience all take energy. And your nervous system is your emotions, your energy in motion. And if they are distracting you with stress or something like that, they're going to distract you from your focus, which is obviously, building the business, scaling the business, and making money. And that's why if you optimize your energy, optimize your nervous system, you're going to optimize your money flow as well. So I think it's so important these days, which I absolutely love that. And love that. Yeah, and I do it. I do all. My son and I, we go up to the sauna and then plunge pool. I do 9D breath work, which is a new one which has come out recently. I'll send you a bit on that if you haven't heard of it before as well.
Brilliant.
Many other things. Tell me, based on that, obviously you do the cold plunges, you do the breath work. You and I did a meditation together. I remember because you got your aura ring on now, and you said to me afterwards, because I did the healing meditation on you. You sent me the screenshot afterwards showing that your heart rate had gone right down during the
Yeah.
like meditation. So, which was kind of cool. So you obviously meditate as well. What else do you do to keep yourself in good nick? I know exercise, but is there anything else that you kind of in terms of biohacking that you do?
So biohacking, there's a number of things, and what I say to people, and I wrote an article about this quite a number of years ago, and the pillars of good health are very straightforward. It's a like scaling. It's simple, but don't misconstrue simple as easy. Simple requires effort. So before we biohack, it's about getting the pillars which make good sense. Sense being your sleep. And people are going to yawn at this, go, oh, not somebody else going to talk about sleep. It is so fundamental. And for anyone who wants to go deep in this, follow Brian Johnson, who is the most tested human being on the planet in terms of all things biohacking. So sleep, exercise. There are so many outsized benefits of exercise. And for me, I was 51 a couple of weeks ago, and I now focus on strength and conditioning at least 3 times a week, mobility every day, so just 5 minutes of stretching, and some form of cardio. I'm still part of the triathlon club, so I try to get out on their long cycles at the weekends, and I'll do a watt bike session in between. So sleep, exercise, nutrition. I'm married to a nutritionist. Colleen used to be a teacher. She retired from teaching, and she qualified as a nutritionist a number of years ago. So this is the good mix of proteins, healthy fats, healthy carbs. Ultimately, you are what you eat. It's all of these old cliches that we heard from our parents and we kind of rolled our eyes. But again, the what you put on your plate is ultimately either energizing you or actually depleting your energy. So in terms of biohacking, something that I only got on to recently is creatine. Probably
Hmm.
in the last 12 months, starting to take 5 milligrams of creatine on a daily basis. And I found it incredible. Creatine was typically associated with weightlifters, but actually what it brings to you is this incredible mental clarity. And for anyone who is training, it helps just uh, retain muscle, and that's especially important as you get into your 50s. So that's sleep, exercise, nutrition, then self-care, some form of self-care, and you mentioned the breath work. So every morning I waking up, we tend to rise somewhere between 5, half 5 in the morning. I literally go to the bathroom, come back in, remove my pillow, and go into 15 to 20 minutes of Wim Hof style breathing, guided just from YouTube or a number of apps that I have. And then it will be straight to the gym. So I have a gym at home. So I'll go in and I'll do some form of exercise for 30 minutes, as I mentioned. And then from that, I grab a coffee and I journal. I journal every morning. Just it'll be some form of gratitude journaling. I've typically set my priorities from the night before, and then if there's something on my mind as I've woken up, I will write that. What is that's on my mind, and then seek to reframe that. So let's say the monster's roaring in the morning. Fairly it wants to bring all the problems to me as I waken up. I hold off, do my breath work, and then do my exercise, and then with a little bit more perspective, I will journal on what those problems are, get them out, and then reframe them. So that tends to be the morning routine.
Brilliant.
And
Love it.
in the evenings, I wind down with a book, try to get to bed between 9 and half 9, yeah, a little bit of reading before bedtime, then set my priorities for the next day. And that tends to be the day, which is very boring and very mundane, but actually works incredibly well for me at this point in my life.
Yeah, and I have to say, you mentioned sleep at the start there, and I have biohacked testing myself and how little sleep I can do, and it really does affect you massively in lots of different ways. So I think that's really important. I think the other ones which you mentioned, I do all of them, and I think brilliant. The journaling, people don't realize that. I think it was Dr. John DeMartini, who I think you know as well. He was on my radio show as well, and he said, when you think about it and you thank about it, you quite often bring about it.
Brilliant.
And
Love that.
which I love as well. And he was in my car. I was picking him up from the Westbury to take him to the radio station one time, and he showed me his literally it's this big gratitude notebook where he's writing all his "I am grateful" statements every single day. And I asked him, I said, "Why do you do it every single day?" And he said, "Well, Doug, 85% of my thoughts are monster thoughts, which you mentioned earlier on in terms of negative thoughts. So I have to try and cancel them out with positivity every single day. And I think the more we can instigate that, which you mentioned in terms of the journaling, where you convert in the mindset the negatives into a positives, it can create a subconscious mind of thinking differently. And I think that's really powerful.
Completely agree. And there's so much science around gratitude. It's look, for a lot of people, this can sound really icky and like, guys, don't talk about gratitude. But when you're in this state of gratitude, you are in an empowered state. And when you're in an empowered state, then you're more likely to think more expansively about your vision. So if you want to scale, scaling's all about getting more expansive with your vision and inspiring not only yourself, but inspiring others. We didn't talk about the people principle, but you've got to get yourself inspired first to inspire others, because great people want to be around those leaders who are constantly positively challenging them to realize their full potential. And if you go back to the hacks of how do I stay more consistently in an empowered psyche than a disempowered one, gratitude is a way to do that. You cannot be in a fearful state, in an angry state, in a frustrated state when you're in a state of gratitude. And we have always things to be grateful for. So every morning I capture 3 gratitudes. And at the end of every evening, I capture 3 wins. So I'm going to bed on 3 wins. And at the end of each week, I have 21 wins. Every week, I'm looking over 21 weeks as I reflect on my week. On a Sunday, I'll reflect on the week, and then I'll capture the 5 best of those 21 each at the end of each week. And then each month, I've got 20 wins of the best wins, which then I capture and collate at the end of each month. And then on an annual basis, then I'm sitting down reflecting on nothing, only wins. So you're living in this state where you are taking it upon yourself to maintain an empowered psyche. Does that mean to say the monster doesn't doesn't roar, he's not there. Of course he's there, but actually we can take it upon ourselves to actually mitigate the voice, the loudness of the monster with these little practices.
Yeah, I love that. And we're running out of time, but just to finish off, twofold question, and they might be the same answer, but trying to think of something that we haven't discussed so far. Twofold. Number one, what would you tell your younger 18-year-old self now that you know all that you know? That's the first part of the question. And the second part, which is related, and it might be the same thing, if I was to give you a stage in front of 10,000 people, beam it out on the podcast to 8 billion people around the planet, you were 95 years of age, it was your legacy speech and your last message to leave with the world, what would that be? And they might be both the same, I don't know, but they're my two questions interlinked.
Wow, those are wonderful questions. I'm actually doing this exercise at the moment called Path of Life, and I'm looking at the major life events from I was born until till today at 51 years of age. What I would say to my 50 or to my 18-year-old self is that it's not a rush. I was the youngest in my year, and that became this rush then to be the youngest to get a university degree, the youngest to qualify as an accountant, the youngest to, everything in my head was about achieving things before others had achieved them. And I woke up at 40 years of age and realized, number one, no one cares. And number two, that I've rushed my way to achieve all of these things. So life is this, I know it's cliche, but it's this wonderful journey, and that each stage has a purpose. It may not be what you want at that point in time, but as Steve Jobs says, you can only join the dots when you reflect back. You cannot join them looking forward. Every stage has a purpose, and it's supporting you to become a better person, to build resilience, to take a different path, to meet different people. Don't be in this rush to get it all done, to tick the boxes, to create the CV. No one cares. It's ultimately about what you want to do, not what you think others want you to do. So that's a long way of saying enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's brilliant. I thought I saw it the other day. Someone said, "Is it more important the journey or the destination?" And actually, the answer that came up is it's the company along the way as well.
Well, I love that. And if you take up the journey versus the destination, if you're delaying your happiness until you reach the destination, if you think of the visual of a mountain, of the summit, it's the smallest part, and you spend the least amount of time on it in the context of actually the scaling journey. So if you're waiting until you get to that summit before you're happy, I can assure you there is no fulfillment there.
Yeah,
It's finding that fulfillment along the way, because you're going to spend the most amount of time on the side of the mountain, not actually on the summit. And the moment you get to that summit, actually you're going to find another one.
I love that. And actually, it makes you reframe, doesn't it? When you make that call, that sales call, and you fail, instead of getting upset about it, it's going, okay, what did I learn there? And how can I improve next time? And I think by reframing it in that context, it can really help you for the next call and the next call and the next call, which makes a massive difference. Brendan, just tell everybody where they can get in touch with you and where they can buy your book as well.
Brilliant. So the book's available on Amazon.
Yep.
You will find it, Simple Scaling, 10 Proven Principles to 10x Your Business. For those watching, there is a copy. And in terms of finding out more, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. Also on our website, simplescaling.com. And indeed, if you want to hear more, uh, from the podcast, ScaleX Insider. It's across all of the podcast platforms, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, all of the normal places you find your podcasts.
And you've had some fantastic guests. And Brendan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I wish you every success in scaling going forward.
You're an absolute gentleman. Thank you for having me on, Doug. Take care.
Pleasure. My name's Doug Gordon, and you've been listening to Brendan McGurgan on Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. I'll be back next week with another inspirational guest. In the meantime, if you need to get in touch, please contact me at doug@dougdgordon.com. From all of us here on the team of the show, I wish you a truly inspirational week. I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.